So good evening and welcome back. We're definitely excited to begin Perikun Gimel, which is the final chapter of Likutei Amorim. Excited for a number of reasons. Naturally, this becomes the final chapter of this magnum opus of the Alter Rebbe. As we mentioned a number of times, the Tanya is divided. There are 5 segments in Tanya, which is Likutei Amorim, Sharich B'Emunah, Igeres HaTshuva, Igeres HaKodesh, and Kuntres Achron. But look, when you say generally Tanya, it's Likutei Amorim. This is the magnum opus of the Alter Rebbe, meaning this is the Alter Rebbe's revolutionary presentation to the Yid, so to say, is that perfect manual in Avodas Hashem, and many manuals which were written for this complicated machinery, state of the journey, the odyssey of the Yid throughout his entire Elam Hazeh. For Zaveda, which we know is very nuanced and very subtle, it's expressed in not only I'm a Yid, I go to shul, and I learn a little bit Torah, a lot of Torah. Avodas Hashem is a very big package, and it's broken down again to many, many details. There's the subtlety in Avodas Hashem, machshava, the ma'aseh, the dibur, the speech, and namely the machshava, which is part of the, so to say, this program which Hashem wants, of pure and clean thought, and shmiras ha'inayim and oznayim, and the whole Avodas Hashem. Again, it's very loaded, as we all know it, and it's very nuanced, as we all know it. So for a complicated machinery, a complicated system, you need a very perfect manual that it should work perfectly. So this is why Likutei Amorim is not, you can't even say a special sefer. The best way to put or one of the better ways to describe Likutei Amorim is that perfect manual for this sophisticated and complicated and complex system, which is Yeridus HaNeshama B'Guf, the Neshama coming down in the body, navigating through all the different ups and downs of life, and maintaining that ongoing dveikus, connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when we're holding the last chapter, the final chapter, the culminating chapter, so it's I want to say it's a room to celebrate, but it's the idea that they have to, after the opportunity of learning together this whole Likutei Amorim, coming to the culminating chapter, definitely is something which is something to point out, and something to celebrate. To the contrary, it gives us just an opportunity to have that clarity, the final clarity, and the final message of the Alter Rebbe. In other words, the final touch and the final explanation and the final message in this very manual, which will again complete the entire message of the Likutei Amorim. I will just of this Likutei Amorim, of this sefer, I will just mention again, and specifically when we're dealing with this Perikun Gimel, as it is also the culminating point of the last 3 chapters, as we mentioned time and again since we began the last 3 chapters, that the Alter Rebbe it's an idea on its own. You don't see the direct connection to the previous chapters, like Memches, Memtes, Nun, and Alter Rebbe himself begins with Tosfos B, or by Heitev, an additional explanation, of thorough explanation on this, which the Yenuka, the quotation of the Yenuka, the famous Yenuka, young little child, which had the open stream of knowledge. Again, he mentioned the terminology Yenuka the first time the Alter Rebbe brought it. He says Ula Tosfos B. He's bringing back the Yenuka and emphasizing, pointing out, depicting a particular expression in that very Yenuka quoted before in Perek Lamed Hey. And that Perek Lamed Hey itself, in other words, bringing back the Yenuka is something unique, because the Yenuka was the message of this Yenuka was a revolutionary message, or that this Yenuka, and especially with Alter Rebbe explains this Yenuka, becomes a consolation. It becomes a comfort to the Yid, to the Eved Hashem, in his despair. As Alter Rebbe uses the lashon, Lama ze Yarden shmisei le'el mazeh. It makes it so stark and doesn't hide anything. After I'm holding Perek Lamed Hey, and he explained you so much of the service of Avodas Hashem and all the messages, Perek after Perek, one Perek more loaded than the other, and so rich and so ishmak, if you will, and brought such and brings such enthusiasm into the avodah of the Beinani, of the avodah of the average Yid. And then Alter Rebbe says, now make the calculation, it still seems to be in vain for what we all came down for, because of the lashon of Alter Rebbe, lachem kol yimei mei yitzur, to fight with all the yitzur, but never overwin, never become the tzaddik, and so on. Again, we explained, and therefore the neshama needs a nechama. Neshama needs a consolation, it needs a comfort, and this becomes the basis of that comfort, this Yenuka. And Alter Rebbe goes with that Yenuka, and his unique explanation, and his innovations within that explanation of the quote of that Yenuka, and with that becomes again a basis to the entire Avodas Hashem of the Yid, the average Yid, the Beinani. And with this he devotes Lamed Hey, Lamed Vav, Lamed Zayin, Lamed Ches. It's all one continuation. And then he goes back in Perek Nun Aleph, he says he brings back the Yenuka, depicting a particular expression of the Yenuka, which is Shechina, Hashem's dwelling in a particular place. What's that supposed to mean? Apparently, Molecular Arts Kavodei. Hashem is everywhere. And he begins a brand new kind of a new idea, and he introduces a new idea. And Alter Rebbe felt very strongly that with this he's going to culminate this very magnum opus of this Likutei Amorim, his magnum opus, which is Likutei Amorim, with this biur, with this explanation. So Perek Nun Gimel is the culminating message as well of this brand new explanation with Tosfos biur, as he begins an additional explanation to the Lashon HaYenuka de La'el, which we again brought him back on stage, and we dissect a particular wording, choice of words, or message, or that nekuda, that point of Ashras Hashchina, what is it supposed to mean, and so on. And after the Alter Rebbe's entire biur, this becomes the ultimate bringing home, so to say, that whole message of the entire Likutei Amorim through this biur, through this explanation. So we begin Perek Nun Gimel, as we mentioned time and again. If you're wherever you're watching this, the advantage of the original website where this is presented is just because you could follow the class with the text, and which is the tanyaonline.com, tanyaonline.com, one word, rather tanyaonline1word.com. You could the separate scroll bar with a text, and also the easy access to all the previous classes from the very beginning of Tanya, and they come up in the same fashion that you have the ability to follow the class with the text accordingly. So we begin Perek Nun Gimel. What is the message of Alter Rebbe? What is the message of the Alter Rebbe until now? In Perek Nun Aleph and Beis. We're not going to go over the Aleph and Beis now. And I don't mean to say the whole thing, but we're not going to go over the whole explanation because it's literally a click away. But basically, we were holding that every and if you're starting, you got to if you're tuning in Perek Nun Gimel to understand Perek Nun Gimel, you need to learn Perek Nun Aleph and Nun Beis in detail. But because what we're going to say now is just kind of the introductory, just to move forward into Perek Nun Gimel. But it's again very brief, and in order to understand, to appreciate it thoroughly, you got to go back, and again, it's just a click away in the different classes from the beginning of Perek Nun Aleph. So Perek Nun Gimel, you come from what we learned till now is that just like the nefesh. In order for the nefesh to come into the body, it has to go through the nerve system, which is the brain, and then from there it has mechlal, a connection to the entire body. In other words, all the energy of the nefesh via the nerve system, via the brain, ultimately manifests in all different limbs, the eye and eyes and lishmaya, the eye to see, the ear to hear, and all the different functions of the body. And so too, when it comes to the Shechina, it enters the Kodesh Kadoshim, in other words, the Chochmah Bina Das, again, the brain system, so to say, in every single Olam. We mentioned every Olam is a structure on its own. In the mushal, it's one organism, one body, and therefore it's one nefesh entering one body. There's no different compartmentalizations within the body itself. In other words, to say that there's different levels, obviously there's different compartments in the body, but a total separation within the body doesn't exist to say the nefesh is to go through this chachma mina das, that chachma mina das, till it enters the lowest level of the body. It's one organism, and therefore it's one brain system, one nerve system, and the nefesh enters, and then it becomes manifest in the entire guf, in the entire body. When it comes to Lamaila, every olam is distinct. Every olam is a separate structure. So the energy to come and have an impact of that olam ought to go through the chabad, chachma mina das, of that olam. And then it comes to Malchus of the final sphere, and has to go through the impact the next olam, and it must go through the chachma mina das of the subsequent olam to have an impact on the entire olam, to create on the neshamas, malachim, whatever that olam consists of. It's Bria and Yitzira and Asiya and so on. And he brings in that in Bria there's a Talmud Shulchan in the Mishnah, in the Yitzira we have the Mishnah Shulchan again. You have to look in Perek and Aleph and Beis to understand, but generally it's the nefesh divested of the system, which is no shaykhs to the system, no connection at all. So we said completely no connection means to say there's nothing within the nefesh that has within itself, prior entering into the system, within itself the idea of meichin, brain, understanding, vision, audio. This doesn't exist within the nefesh. It starts having it's only when it enters into the brain system, into the nerve system, then it starts having a connection to the keichariya, keichashmiya, and all these other faculties, talents, which exist within the system, the organism of the body. And so too, the Eivishter, the way the Eivishter is formed so by himself, is no shaykhus to Eilumis at all, no connection to Eilumis. It's called stimuduchol stimin, that even in areas in the world of Sasim, he is Sasum, he's completely hidden, just like he's hidden from the Almadias Galia, the revealed worlds. As we as again explained in detail then. What does that mean? Because it knows the idea that Hashem is truly divested and not connected to Nisasum. He's completely hidden even from the Almin Stimin. Conversely, for that reason, again, we always mention that it just turns it around as such. Just like he's Motzi there, he's exactly Motzi here. But because Betzim he's removed, and then the Hashem to have an impact, in other words, to come into Eilam is to have an impact on Eilam is that has to go through the Chachma Mina Das, the nerve system of every single Eilam, to have an impact and be connected to and produce all the productions of that particular Eilam. And then El Yitzira, the same thing, is to go through the Chachma Mina Das of El Yitzira, that the Rebbe calls the Kodesh HaKadoshim of El Yitzira, Holy of Holies of El Yitzira. And again, we explain why is the Chachma Mina Das that interface between the Elokus, the way it's removed completely from Eilamis, and the connection and being the source of the productions of that Eilam. We explain the uniqueness of the Chacham Bina Das, you can see there, which is basically the Teira, the energy of Teira, and so on, which is the Chachmas Bina Sividaiti Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's the way it comes into every single Eilam. And then we've concluded Perek Nun Beis that that's the way it comes into the Eilam, in other words, to the Eilam Asiya Haruchnis, to the spiritual level of Eilam Asiya. Because we know that in Eilam Asiya, there's the Eilam Asiya Gashmis, the physical Eilam Asiya, and then Eilam Asiya Ruchni. So you have Bri Yitzira Asiya Haruchnis, and then Asiya Gashmis, the physical and the spiritual Eilam Asiya, the metaphysical Eilam Asiya, and then the physical Eilam Asiya. And again, he goes through all of them. He says not only these four Eilamis, there's Eilamis Adin Ketz, infinite amount of Eilamis. Maybe here he says Revav is tens of thousands of different levels, and each one, in order that the energy should enter into the Eilam, must go through the Chacham Minadas. Again, even these few minutes, it's still, you're hands-on this subject, you got to click into the previous chapters. So he goes on, meaning now the Alter Rebbe is saying that then this energy has to come and pierce through this Eilam and become part of this Eilam, and it was part of the energy and emanation, or energy rather, of Eilam and the production of Eilam Asiyah. With Eilam Asiyah Gashmis, this physical Eilam Asiyah, which produced the entire and created the entire Eilam with all its details and complexities and whatever we know about Eilam Haza, which shows us also what a Eilam higher than Eilam Haza is, if we can't even get our mind wrapped around such a small part of Eilam Haza. We'll never get to the end of the sophistication of this Eilam Haza and all its millions and billions and beyond creatures and creations, and this is this which we know, and then even within the structure of Elam Hazeh, the universe and multiple planets. I mean, this is stars and Hashemayim, B'chol Tzavam, B'chol Asher Allah. This is extremely a sophisticated creation. But in order that there should be that creation, the Elokus had to enter the Chacham Minadas of Elam Asiyah Gashmis. But what's that supposed to mean? So he goes on and he explains, within Elam Hazeh itself, there is the Shechina, that potency of the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which entered in a way that not only that becomes the creating force to create all these creations and creatures of Elam Hazeh, the way we know it, which is an Elam of a natural world, a world which on its own does not demonstrate that oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, doesn't demonstrate the divine. But within Elam Hazeh, there was areas where it came in, the energy of Elokus, of Hashem, came into Elam Hazeh, and it landed and it connected to the very physicality of this Elam, and remained, and not only remained, but as it came in and connected with the physicality of Elam, of this world, it maintained a full demonstration of the Ein Sofness of the infinite energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, the divine energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu remained overt in a very physical place within Elam Hazeh, known to us as the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The Kodesh HaKadoshim. Remember we said the Elokus comes into the Elam via the Kodesh HaKadoshim of every single Elam. So we have our own Kodesh HaKadoshim, which is in the Beis HaMikdash, primarily in the Bayis Rishon, which there we had everything. In other words, we know the Gilui Elokus, the revelation, the manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Bayis Rishon, was at its peak. In other words, in comparison to all the other states, so to say, of these edifice tents or so on. Tents, the lashon of the Torah and Tanakh, it's about the tent, and it was a non-permanent state of the structure for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, starting from the Mishkan and the Midbar, which was a moving Mishkan, and then Mishkan Shili given, and finally the Bayis of the building Yerushalayim, known the Bayis Rishon. It was the highest level of revelation of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As we know, the Gemara tells us that even the Bayis Sheni, which was built in the same spot, which is again that Mokim Muchon, that place which is the eternal place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu would rest, which is Yerushalayim, the Beis HaMikdash, didn't have that energy of the Bayis Rishon. Didn't have that overt revelation of the Ein Sof. So in the Bayis Rishon, which was the iconic, so to say, home, housing, the revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which was the point of the Beis HaMikdash, also the Mikdash Shechanti B'Seicham, Hashem says, I'm going to dwell there. This was the Kodesh HaKadosh, namely, it's the whole Beis HaMikdash was holy, but there was different levels of Kedusha, as the Gemara says, and the Rambam brings, one level of Kedusha, holiness, and sanctity at its own, till you come to the most sacred place within the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which ultimately becomes the most sacred place in the entire world, which is the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. And that Holy of Holies is where the Shekhinah enters in order to impact and to connect to and ultimately be the producing koyach of the entire creation of Elam Hazeh Gashmi, this very physical Elam Hazeh. So in the Kodesh HaKodashim, where the Shechina entered, the Lukus was Begoli. It was revealed in a way that the physical Kodesh HaKodashim contained that Shechina, and it was very obvious physically. It was sensed that this is the interface, meaning to say that this is not only, in other words, this is the place where the Shechina, this is the physical, this physical Kodesh Kodashim is that place where the Shechina would enter and ultimately via the Kodesh Kodashim have the whole impact on Elam Asiyah Gashmi. So that very place was the container of the Shechina with all its potent energy, demonstrating the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which were that energy which would have to come into Elam Hazeh to be the creator of Elam Hazeh. And therefore we find the Kodesh Kodashim, which the place where Hashem dwells in the Kodesh Kodashim is the Arin, and the famous expression, Mokim ha'arin eina min amida. It was evident to all that there's something dynamic and mind-boggling happening over here. We say mind-boggling because this is the point that we are limited, we understand and we perceive, we appreciate things in a very natural manner, but yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu is beyond in nature. That is why he's Ein Sof, he's not limited to the parameters and borders and confinements of nature. So this was very evident, overtly evident in the Kodesh Kodashim. We say Mokim Amrin Amida, we mentioned this a few times throughout our study in the Tanya, but this is definitely an important place to point this out, to be able to see clearly what transpired in that very place within the Kodesh HaKodashim. We say Mokim HaMa'arin in Amida, so the Arin was, if I'm not mistaken, it was 2 or 1.5 by 2.5 for sure, 2.5 its length. So if you measured from the Arin and the Kodesh HaKodashim, for example, in the Mishkan, take the Mishkan, it was 10 by 10, the Beis HaMikdash was larger, but let's say the Mishkan, it was 10 by 10. So let's say so the Arin in its length rather was 2.5 amos. So from the wall of the border of the Arin to the wall of the Kodesh Kodashim, say 2.5. So it should have been 3 3/4, and then on the other side 3 3/4, because this takes 2 and this is 2.5. But yet, when in reality, when one would take a measuring tape, and naturally no one could run into the Kodesh Kodashim to do so physically, because you're not supposed to go to the Kodesh Kodashim. It is prohibited to go into the Kodashim for everybody, for that matter, including the Kohen Gadol as well, the highest priest, if it's not at the particular time when Hashem permits the Kohen Gadol to go to the Kodesh Kodashim. Because the Kohen Gadol goes in a certain time, even on that holy day of Yom Kippur, in a time that he's not meant to go in. It's a violation, it's a transgression, and has dire consequences. And when he went in, he wasn't there with a measuring tape. He did his Avodah, which is Avodah of Yom Kippurim. But so no one was able to physically go in. But theoretically, if someone went in, and this was the Mitzias Begashmis physically with a measuring tape from the wall, from the end, the border of the Arin until the wall was 5 amos, 5 cubits. And from the other side was also 5 cubits. And the whole Kodesh Kodashim was 10 by 10. You measure the Arin, it was 2.5. Which is naturally a mind-boggling concept. This is 2.5, so it should have been from the wall 3 3/4 and 3 3/4. No, from the wall, the border of the Arin till the wall was 5 in each direction. And you measured the entire Arin, it was 10 by 10. So, which is the expression Mokim ha'arin eina min amida. It's a Mokim, it has its place, it has parameters. Eina min amida. It didn't take space. And that's again something which, as much as we'll talk about it, we'll try to explain it, we'll try to point it out and get in detail. There's no way to appreciate this, no way that we could wrap our minds on this. What is that supposed to mean? Because the Mokim ha'arin, that was the Kodesh Kodashim, which houses and hosts the Shechina, in other words, allows the Shechina to enter into the Elam, in this case, Elam Asiyah Gashmis. So the area where it enters, again, similar to the nerve system, it's not just another vital organ. We appreciate the nerve system, the brain, the connection with the nerves of the brain on a total different level, the way it connects to any other limb. because it's a nafshizdik expression or nafshizdik manifestation. The nerve system, a soul type of expression. It's all, the whole energy is in the brain, is in the nerve system. And so too, when it enters into the physical Kedesh Kodashim, it's all very different than the way it's expressed itself out of the Kedesh Kodashim throughout the entire Elam. But here the Alter Rebbe says it, this is a general explanation, but the Alter Rebbe goes on and says, because the energy itself, so to say, of the Shekhinah is reduced as it would be manifest in the rest of the Elam, as opposed to the ways of Kedesh Kodashim, and maintained that Malchus, that Shekhinah energy of the highest of levels, Malchus the Atzilus and Malchus the Bria, without the, so to say, the diluted, if you will, form of the way it would go through Elam HaYitzir, Elam HaSiyah, Ruchnis, and so on, as opposed to the way it came out. It was manifest in the entire Elam, then it attains that levush, that garment, or that cover-up, or that expression of Elam HaYitzir and Elam HaSiyah, and therefore the rest of the world, you don't see on its own that miraculous expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The world runs up Teva, even though Hashem wants us to find God within nature, and to fuse the nature with the L'mayla min HaTeva, with the beyond in nature. But that's the Avodah of the Yid, that's the service of the Yid. It's not default, as opposed to the Kedesh Kodashim. That's the way it was. Mokim Ha'rein Min Amidas, nothing to do with the Avodah of the Yid. This is the way it is. As opposed to, in Elam Hazeh, it's Loshen Teva, Tuba V'Yamsuf, meaning to say, nature, the world runs al pi Teva, and it's incumbent upon the Yid to find the Lukus, the Emes Hashem L'Elam, the godly reality within nature itself. It again takes a lot of toil and Avodah, a lot of Torah mitzvahs, and so on and so forth. Because this is where Lukus, the Shekhinah, the potency of the Shekhinah, comes in overtly, and there already comes in covertly, which is again, I'll try to use the Lashon, because it already attains the garments of the inferior elements, which Kaviyachal reduces the revelation or the manifestation of Elokus in that particular elam. In Elam Hazeh, in other words, out of the Kodesh Kodesh, namely in the nitty gritty of Elam. So let's see the Lashon. Show your Beis Rishon Kaim, the Beis Hamikdash was there, and he says Beis Rishon. And later himself he's going to contrast the Beis Sheni. Because we know that again there's a difference. Chamisha Dvarim, the Gemara says, did not exist even in the Beis Sheni, which again was a reduction on the Gili on the overt revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It wasn't just Chamisha Dvarim, 5 things weren't there. Okay, so they were missing, but they were the container, they were the conduits through which the Elokus came shining through, which was there in the Beis Hamikdash Rishon, which was not there in the Beis Hamikdash Sheni. So he starts with the Beis Hamikdash Rishon. The Orein and the Luchais were in the Kedesh Kodashim, which that itself was one of the things which were missing in the Beis Sheni. So the Orein and the Luchais, what does it mean? What is the meaning of the Orein and the Luchais in the Kedesh Kodashim? There's a Shechina, Shemachz Datzilos, Shebechiris Gile, and Baruch Hu Sheir Sham, the divine presence, which is Malchus the Atzilus, which is the revelation of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We don't need to take even an extra moment. Atzilus is that element which was myriads of times, even in this context of the last 3 chapters, that this is the revelation. Atzilus is a olam which houses HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even though Malchus is the lowest level, which eventually, that's the Malchus which becomes eventually the Malchus Chamalz Kolamim. But we say Malchus the Atzilus, this is the revelation of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Especially we speak about Malchus Shechina again, as we mentioned. This is the Gilead in Sof, but it's Malchus Atzilus. So it's the Gilead in Sof, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Blessed be here, be Sheidah Sham, dwell there. That comes into Elam Hazeh Gashmi. So again, it goes through the Kedesh HaKadoshim, which would be the brain, the nerve system, so to say, of the Choch Min Hadas within Elam Hazeh. That is Mulubeshes Baseres HaDibres, because Seres HaDibres is Teira. It's the source of Teira. This is the revelation of Matan Teira with Baseres HaDibres. So we say Choch Min Hadas of every Elam, the holy shrine of every single Elam, Obviously, we can appreciate. We don't have to find any connecting points. What is it? Oren connected to the Chacham Min Das, because that's where the Teira was. That was the Luchis was. So therefore, the energy directly entered into the brain, the Chacham Min Das, which is the Aseres Adibres, source of Teira, the core of Teira. And there, it's just like again in the nerve system. It's not just like another, or as we used the expression before. And in the past, not just another vital organ, but the entire nefesh is manifest in the nerve system, in the brain. And so too, when a lukus comes down to Elamazet, enters the Kedesh Kodesh Elamazet, which was that physical Kedesh Kodesh, where there was the lukus naseres adibris. So the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu dwells there and invests in us with greater intensity and greater strength. Begilui Rava Otzum, and Yeser says with greater intensity and greater strength. Begilui Rava Otzum, Yeser Migiluya, Beichal is Kochikochim Shalamayla Ben Lemizaliyanim. With greater revelation and more intense revelation, more than revelation, the way it is in the chambers above, and the chambers of Kodshik Kodshim, and the Eilemes Elyanim, in the supreme worlds. Now that's an important message over here, which is new over here, because we say the Kedesh Kodashim El Mabriya and the Kedesh Kodashim El Mayitzira, the Chacham Min Das, of all these levels again becomes the conduit, the interface, which Elukus comes into that Eilam. But here he says that the Elukus, which came down into the physical Eilam, into the Kedesh Kodashim, was greater, more intense than the Gilui, than the revelation of the Kedesh Kodashim of the higher worlds. Why so? They aren't the higher worlds, and this is El Mazak Gashmi. So if you say that it reflected, so to say this, the Kedesh Kodashim reflected the Kedesh Kodashim of all the other supreme worlds, I could understand, but it by definition should have been a level lower, because you're dealing with the physical of this El Mazak Gashmi. He says no. Why are the Chacham Min Das of every Eilam the conduit or that interface to way Elokus connects with the Eilam? Because that's the Kedesh HaKodashim of that Eilam. Because it's the Chacham Min Das of that Eilam. And what was the Chacham Min Das? He says that's the Teira of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Chacham Askum and Minaskum, because it's Chacham Min Das of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore that becomes the Kedesh HaKodashim through which the Shechina enters into that Eilam in order to be manifest in the entire Eilam. And produce and create everything which is associated with that Eilam. But that tells us in itself why here in the Eilam Hazeh Gashmi, it's B'Yeser Eis, B'Yeser Oz, with greater strength and greater intensity, for the reason because the Aseres Adibris, this is the Teira, the actual Teira itself. Just like we say the Eibishter did not give the Teira on high, it exists on high, but the real core Teira is by Yered Hashem al Sinai. He brought it down to this Eilam. Right? Malachim said, Tnohit Chal Hashemayim, famous Gemara. Malachim said, bring your hide, your glory, I leave your glory on high. But Hashem says, no, the Teira belongs here. Which again, in the end of the day, Hashem gave the core of the Teira is Dafka in Elam Hazeh, in this physical world. So the Teira is the Kedesh HaKodashim. The Teira is that conduit through which Elokus comes and manifests in a particular Eilam. When you're talking about the actual Teira itself, not only the Chacham Min Das, which represents the Teira, starting with Chacham Min Das of Atzilus, with Chacham Min Das of Abriya, and Misham HaTalmud Shulufanayin, and Misham HaMishnah Ufanayin from El Matzir. True, but where is the actual Teira? The actual Teira was given in El Mazeh. And if the actual Teira is this which contains the potency and the energy, the deep energy of the revealing energy of the Shekhinah, so that itself tells you that the Kedesh HaKodashim over here, which had the ark over here, which contained the actual luchais, the Aseres Adibris, which you have the Aneichi Hashem Malikecha, which again came down Dafkan El Mazeh, that itself tells us that the energy which exists in the luchais here in the Kedesh HaKodashim is much greater. And how much greater? B'Yeser Eis, with the Yeser Eis, with greater intensity and greater strength than the Kedesh HaKodashim, all the other elements. Because here the Teira is given here. This is where the actual Aseres Adibris is. And because Aseres Adibris hein klolos HaTeira kul. Aseres HaDibros, this is the general message, again, the core, the general message of the entire Torah. All the energy of the Torah lies within the Aseres HaDibros. By the way, the famous Sadi Goy, he shows you all the 613 mitzvahs, how they're all embedded in the 10 Aseres HaDibros. But we know that Aseres HaDibros is close to Torah Kul. De Matan Torah, Shishi B'Sivon, but Hashem revealed Aseres HaDibros, revealed himself. He said, Nech Hashem L'kech Aseres HaDibros. And then came all the details of the Torah. But this is the klolos, this is the rules, or this is the general energy of the entire Torah. So that's the real Chochmah Bina Das. That's the real conduit for the Shechina, because this is the Torah. This is the real, the brain system, so to say, the nerve system, the brain system, which is not just something which will ultimately come down, and again, as we know, the Chochmah of every single Eilam becomes the source of the Chochmah of the subsequent Eilam, and so to the Bina, the Das, and so on. This is Chochmah Bina because this is the Aseres HaDibros, not only figurative in the Supreme Eilam, but this is where Torah came down to Eilam Hazak Gashmi, and that's where the Aseres HaDibros were, which that was the Luchas in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So the energy, the Gili, the revelation of the Shekhinah, which comes through the Kodesh HaKadoshim, is B'Yasser Seis, B'Yasser Oz, with greater intensity and greater strength, not only in the Eilam Hasaliyanim, but higher than the Cholis Kochi Kochim of the Eilam Hasaliyanim, even higher than the Chochmah Bina Das of every single Eilam. Which comes from the Supreme Chochmah, rather Supreme Chochmah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the Chochmah Datzilus, the Eilam Hamidis Galia, which is much greater than the revealed world, starting from Eilam HaBriya. Namely, the Eilam HaYitzira, which is real core Almadis Galia. There's a number of places. Eilam HaTzilus is Almadis Kasya, Briya is Hascholas Kaviyach Briya of Yesh, obviously in the most subtle levels possible. But nonetheless, this is already Almadis Gali. A number of places it says, but it also belongs to Almadis Gasi, because it's still in comparison to Elam HaYitzira. Yitzir very Cheshach. It says Cheshach is Bria is associated with Cheshach, like we say every single day in davening, based on a pasuk. Yitzir very Cheshach. That Cheshach apparently Yitzira is lower than Bria. Why is this called Eir and this called Cheshach? Apparently, it should have been the opposite. Bria should be Eir and Yitzira should be Cheshach. But at least in comparison to the great light of Eilam HaBriya. But he said just the opposite, because Eir is usually a lower darga than Cheshach. Yosh is Cheshach Sisrei. Where does Hashem's hiding place, or where does Hashem's domain? This is in Sisrei, is in Cheshach, because revelation is more of a definition, it's a distinction, it's a particular presentation, it's revealed in this manner, which is again not the way the Eibishter comes into a specific way of the way he presents itself with that particular revelation, which is shows in Akbala, a limitation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem himself is more about Seiser, hiding, Sasum, Yeshu B'Seiser Elyin. Yoshes Cheshach Sisrei. He places his hiding in Cheshach, because Cheshach is higher, deeper, Sosum, higher than Gilui, as we mentioned many times and explained. I need not to explain more, because a revelation is a particular limited form of expression, one way or another. So you have higher revelations, obviously, which are much greater than a lower, inferior type of Gilui, but nonetheless, a Gilui it is, as opposed to deeper within HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's more sus, more hidden, more concealed. So Bria in other places it's called Bria is also part of the Almadi Iskasia. So he says, and we will see it also, because the Rebbe says the Malchus, that Silus, in the way it invests in Malchus, the Bria comes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim without the Malchus of Yitzira and Asiya, and even the Kodesh HaKadoshim of the Yitzira, which is Chacham Midas about Elam HaYitzira, Chacham Midas about Masiyah Ruchni, spiritual, let me say. It skips that, but why Malchus the Bria? If you're trying to say the entire potency of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the Shechina of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why, which is namely Malchus Datzilus, why does he mention Malchus the Bria? Because Malchus the Bria is also an Elam, which is Cheshach, which is Sasum, and therefore when that comes into the physical Kodesh Kadoshim, it is the greatest Gilui, much greater than the Heichalis, the chambers of Kodesh Kadoshim, in the Elam HaSiyah, Ruch, spiritual Elam HaSiyah, and in the Elam even Elam HaYitzira. So he goes on and he says, It's even much higher than Al Midis Galia. So when we speak about Al Midis Galia, it could be Elam Abriya, but namely Elam Yitzir, which is a world of Gilu, Yitzir Eir. In order to engrave this energy in physical stones, well, that's the way it was. It was engraved and connected to the physicality of the Luchos, the revelation of Malchus Datzilus, even coming through Malchus Debriya. It's fascinating. I mean, it's nothing less than revolutionary, and that's what he says. Lo yardim madrega madrega. It didn't go through level after level. The way the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu evolves from the supreme element to this very physical element, because because this physical world is conducted via nature, via the investment of the physical nature. This is a literal translation. Which means the energy evolves itself one level after another. That you look in Elam Hazeh, you see everything, the conduct of everything and default of everything is the nature, the conduct of nature, and the rule of nature and the manifestation of nature. Everything is in Elam Hazeh, on its own, without digging deeper, through Aveda and through focusing and so on. It's a world that does not demonstrate the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So therefore, and in order that to happen, so the Elokus which evolves and ultimately creates Elam Hazeh has to go through all these different garments and garment after garment, and again in this context go through the Kedesh Kodashim of that Elam, and then the Malchus of that Elam, and then go through the next Elam, all the way till it has such an impact that whatever is created in Elam Hazeh is misnai, conducts himself based on his slapshus teva gashmi, physical nature, as opposed to the way it was in the Luchos. In the Luchos, like we said, and which was clearly evident through this idea of Mokim Ha'orim, which houses the Luchos, was Einim Min Amida, which means you saw vertically a Lukus, and not stam a miracle. It has a number of places. Interesting that Hashem makes a miracle. It's something the mind could appreciate much more than the concept of Mokim Ha'orim Einim Min Amida. And very brief, because when you say a miracle overrides nature. Hashem's intervention, so to say, the miraculous Hashem. It's hard to say Hashem's intervention because Hashem's nature is also Hashem's nature, but Hashem's miraculous intervention, it crushes nature. In other words, it overrides nature, to say it better. So that's fine. So one way or another comprehend is nature, and then Hashem's miraculous conduct overrides nature. Here, Mokim Ha'orim Lamida, it is nothing what the mind could ever appreciate it at no level, because it's not just a miracle which overrides nature. It's that fusion of nature and miracle in one package. It's Mokim Ha'orim, and that itself is Einim Min Hamida. It's not something we can appreciate the miracle of Purim, of Pesach, of the Kriyas Yamsov, of the Ten Commandments. The blood turned into the water, turned into blood. So it took over. In this case, synonymous, unanimously, simultaneously, there's a mokim and that mokim is Einim Min Amida. Measure the Orin, and the Orin doesn't take space. It's something which is beyond miracle. We mentioned perhaps this in the past as well. I've spoken about it so many times. The mokim and Orin Amida was a clear demonstration of the highest levels of God and godliness, much more than any other miracle that ever transpired from the very beginning of the creation of man. Because what that was the overriding of Nes over Teva. And this case was the fusion with Nes and Teva, which shows again from a place which is beyond even Nes, beyond even the transcendence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which would be again described as miracle, the limitless energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is beyond that. Because it combines both energies together at once, at all times. Mokim Ha'orim Einim Min Amida. It's a place. In other words, it's the Teva, and that itself doesn't take up space. Again, even to say it, to imagine it. which in other miracles we saw it, we could have imagined, we could have appreciated, we understood that it's a great cut, but this is beyond even the area of miracle because it combines miracle and teva. So again, it was embedded into the very physical stone of the luchos, because the luchos were about the energy of the aseres hadibres, the true chacham min hadas, because this is the Torah, this is the core of Torah. So in order for that to come in and to embed itself, so to say, and connect to the aseres hadibres, there had to be a different system. It could not go through the same system as the creation of Elam Hazeh. And that's where he goes through. He says, "Aluchis ma'aseh elikim," but the luchis were ma'aseh elikim, the actions of God. V'michtav elikim, and the inscription of God Himself is l'mayla me'teva shel mazeh gashmi, which is higher than the function of this physical world. Anishba me'aras hashchina, which comes from the ha'ara of hashchina shbeichel kodesh kodesh, the asiyah, the ha'ara of the shechina, which goes through the kodesh kodesh of Elam Asiyah, the lowest level again. Even in this case, Asiyah Haruchni is the spiritual Masiyah, and that is the air and the light and the energy comes to El Masiyah, the spiritual Masiyah, but then also the El Masiyah Gashmis, the Chlali, which is included. But it's already a version, so to say, of the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way it's obscured and concealed with all these different layers. It goes through the Kodesh Kodashim of El Masiyah Ruchnis, and then eventually comes down into Malchus Dasi and eventually creates the spiritual El Masiyah and El Mazeh Gashmi. Therefore, El Mazeh Gashmi mitnaheg, conducts itself based on nature. Masha'enkin, as opposed to in the Orein, in the Luchais, the whole evolvement was different. Chochmi lo datzilus, elobchinos chochmi lo datzilus, which is the supreme chochma batzil. She calls hatayda shebiyuda dibris, which is the energy of Torah in these aseres and 10 dibris nislab shebemalchus datzilus, invested in malchus de atzilus. And he says of the bria, again, as we mentioned, bria also is part of the alma di skasio, and the reason why it must go through bria, it's mentioned in other places, why it must go through bria as well, because in the end it has to touch base on something physical, so it has to have a connection to that transition between Elam HaYetzilus and Elam HaBriya. In other words, it has to be connected to Elam HaBriya, because Briya is the first level where the Eibush becomes a Beire, Yesh Mi'ayin, one way or another. Even though in Briya there's no physical Yesh, but subtle Yesh there is, so it has to be connected one way or another to Elam HaBriya, because Malchut Atzilus, Kaviyach will never be able to, so to say, enter into something Gashmius. And at the end of the day, it was a luchis gashmi, so orin gashmi is a physical luchis and a physical orin. When we're talking about luchis, it's ma'aseh likima, but michtav elikim, but nonetheless it touched base with gashmi, so Elam Hazeh, so as a shaykh has to have some shaykhs to bria, but nonetheless it was not diluted through any other level which were lower than Elam HaBriya. He says no, the energy of Malchus Atzilus, the bria levadon solely entered into the luchos vein levad and yuchadis bein yitzav shebeseichon, and Malchus the Atzilus and Malchus the Bria, they are solely that. Solely Malchus the Atzilus, Malchus the Bria are totally one with the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu within them, and they are called Shechina Sheira B'Kirchikoch in the Bais Rishon. This is the divine presence which dwells in the holy of holies of Bais Rishon, of the first Bais Rishon, the first Bais Hamikdash, Aydis of Slavshusan, Biyud, Adibris, through their investment in the 10 commandments, Al-Chakukis, Baluchas, Sheba'orin, Benes, U'Maiseh Likim Chaim, the way they're engraved in the luchis, in the actual tablets which existed in the Orein, miraculously, benes, in a fashion of miracle, or ma'aseh likim chaim, and the actions, literally translated, of the living God. You saw the living God, the core of Kaviyachol, of the living God, or the core of the living God. The Malchus Atzilus is the way it's embedded in Malchus the Bria, without its connection to the subsequent elements of Yitzir and Asiyah, directly into the Luchis. And again, as we mentioned, it's namely the energy of Atzilus, the Chochmi Lov HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It just must go into Malchus the Bria, just because it must touch base in the physicality of the Orin. In other words, Malchus Atzilus, because Atzilus is beyond any type of Bria, even subtle Bria, it doesn't connect to Elam Hazeh Gashmi. So it has to be in Elam HaBriya, there has to be the Malchus of Elam HaBriya. And again, we're mentioning this yet again, just to appreciate where does the Elam why Malchus the Bria? If it's the source, if it's the undiluted presentation of Elokus, which is associated with a world of Atzilus, answer, because in order to touch base on something which in the end of the day is a nivra, it was a tangibility, there was tangibility in the Arin and in the Luchas itself. So it has the Shaykhs the Bria, but nonetheless, Bria is also, as he says over here, Alma Diskasya Me'akad Be'elam Bria, Kinedel Yedechein, which is the Alma Diskasya, which nests in Elam Bria, as we mentioned before. Elam Bria is still associated with Cheshach, so it still maintains that Eir of Atzilus, one way or another, and that energy is invested in the very physical luchas, in the very physical Ari. And much more than it is in the Elam Esaliyah, the Kedesh Kadashim, the Supreme Elam, is because this is the Teda, the core of Teda, which was given to Afghan Elam Hazar Kashmi. And that's why Makim Harin Inim Lamida. Because Benes Umaisilikim Chayim, as he says over here, it was Chakukas Beluchas Shabarim Benes Umaisilikim Chayim. It didn't go through all the other channels which the Elam has created, even though the Kedesh Chodashim was in this very physical Elam. But it didn't go through the same channels. And everything, the whole phenomenon of that place of the Arin and the Luchas was totally distinct and different. Bez Hashem, we will continue without the Rebbe says how wasn't the Bayis Sheni. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a Bayis, which I'm sure, but then when we come around it, we will have it ready the Beis Hamikdash Shlishi. What happens the time there wasn't a Beis Hamikdash? Like it says, Chara Beis Hamikdash Ein Lo Kadosh Baruch Hu Be'elam Yodal Dam Shel Alachem. Hashem does not have in His world only the 4 cubits of Allah, and as Alter Rebbe is going to explain what transpires when the Yid learns Torah, how this becomes tantamount to this which was in the Bati HaMikdashes, in the 2 Bati HaMikdashes, even the Bayis Sheni, which was a step lower. He explains how the workings of the Shechina, the way it came down to the Bayis Sheni, which made it a step lower than the way it was in Bayis Rishon, and how it ultimately manifests to the person who learns Torah and does mitzvahs. And how this, as he connects, once he comes into the performance of the Yid's learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, which again, this is which the Hashem says this substitutes Kabiyachal, or one way or another, the whole experience of the Lakus coming into Elam through the Beis Hamikdash, through the Makim Harim, the Luchas. Mishachor Beis Hamikdash Ein Lo Kadosh Baruch Hu Elam El Dam Dam Shel Alachem. And how this would ultimately bring the message, the culminating message, the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Amorim, to its ultimate light, to us to appreciate this idea on its own, and how to appreciate why this becomes the final, so to say, the stamp on the Likutei Amorim, as we mentioned earlier, this perfect manual that Alter Rebbe brought in, introduced into Elam, as we get closer to Yemais HaMashiach, in order to be able to perfectly implement the reason why we were all created, which is to serve to serve our Creator in the most perfect manner, and eventually, as we enter Mamashi Yemais HaMashiach, everything will be mitzvahs v'tzeinecha. Accordingly, have a wonderful day.